Alrighty, good evening, everybody. You've got the Berean here. I do apologize ahead of time um, due to some technical difficulties at the house. I'm actually coming to you tonight from Taco Bell. No, they are not an official sponsor of our show tonight, but um, definitely I want to say first and foremost, thank you to everybody who is watching, everybody who catches the videos even after the live show is completed. I also want to say this evening that Dan has a few things going on and he will not be with us this evening, but our prayers definitely go out for him. As you can see from the topic tonight, we are dealing with an event that happened here in the US today. We actually had a full solar eclipse go through part of the country, and many parts of the country at least had a partial eclipse. And I do know that most people do understand and realize an eclipse happens when a standard eclipse happens when when the moon passes between the earth and the sun in such a fashion that the shadow of the moon comes across the earth. It's a beautiful sight, actually. If you've never experienced one, just imagine in the middle of the day that uh, the entire everything outside actually looks like you're wearing sunglasses. It's a weird feeling whenever you see it and all. But with the thought in mind of how the moon does come between the earth and the sun, and how for just a brief time the life-giving sun, the light coming from the sun, is blocked by something. I couldn't help as I considered about that how many times in my life I would let something come between myself and seeing God clearly, seeing His Son clearly. Um, it falls along the same lines as it falls along the same lines of what we see with Peter as he was in the boat, and Christ said, "Well, it's me." And Peter said, "Well, if it's really you, then have me come out there to you. Let me walk on the waves with you." And Jesus called Peter on his bluff and said, "Okay, come on out here." Well, when Peter came out on the water, at first he started walking on the water just as Christ did. And then it says that he got to looking at the wind and the waves and everything else around him. And it was at that point that he started to sink. Now, it was not specifically that these things stood between him and Christ, but that they took his focus. His focus went from being on Christ to being on the crisis of the situation. And because of this, he did begin to falter. He did begin to sink. And, I can only speak for myself. The assumption is that this happens with most everybody, but I can definitely say for myself that I've let things come between me and Christ in a similar fashion. It's something that at times I still even struggle with today, strangely, or maybe not strangely. I am a human being, so it's kind of a normal thing, to be honest. Uh, I don't want anybody thinking that maybe you're abnormal or odd because you have struggles. Guess what? We all have struggles. Even your pastor at church, he still has things that he struggles with. The deacons, the ushers, your praise and worship team. Guess what? They still struggle. They still have day-to-day things. so many times, especially as newer or younger believers, um, the impression that oh well, my pastor, he's so godly. He's some even take it to the point of going, well, he's infallible. I hate to burst your bubble, but leadership is not infallible. Even Paul recognized this. Paul recognized this himself. He even said, he said to the church at Galatia, when he was talking about how somebody was leading them away from the truth that he had presented to them. And he came back and said, if even I come back and try to teach you something different, Paul recognized that he could have faltered. He said, if me or an angel comes to teach you something different, then you may stand your ground. Don't let anybody mislead you. Um, you know, in another place, Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ, showing that he himself was showing once again that, guess what? I may not always be following Christ in my decisions. That became so very evident when Paul was speaking, and he told us, he said, there are things that I ought to do, and I don't do them. And there are things that I shouldn't be doing. And guess what? Those are the things that I do. Paul faced this, and some would describe Paul as being, ne- you know, not counting Christ, Paul being up there pretty high. You've got Paul and Moses and people like that, and Paul saying, "I struggle. I have a fight. It became so very, very evident when he was arrested. And as Paul was arrested, he was brought before the high priest. He was brought into the court, and the high priest commanded that Paul be struck. And Paul, basically, in his own fashion, cursed him for ordering that he be struck. And those around said, you dare speak like that to the high priest? And Paul immediately repented. He said, how dare I speak such a thing against God's anointed high priest? It didn't mean that what the high priest had said to do was in the right. Paul recognized the authority, the God ordained authority of the high priest. And he recognized that he had done something wrong and immediately repented for it. Even when you look all the way back at Moses, oh my goodness, how many times did Moses mess up? He killed an Egyptian. He argued with God more than once. Um, he got so angry. There were times he went to God and said, "Kill these people off. Just do away with them. They're always fighting against you, God." And God had to put Moses in his place. He even reached the point where God commanded him to speak to the rock, and Moses was so angry that he struck the rock when God commanded him to do different. Guess what? That is sin. When you disobey a direct order from God, that is sin. I don't care if you're the greatest preacher in the world or the newest Christian that has just received Christ. Doesn't matter which one you are. Sin is sin. It does not matter what your rank or status as a Christian is. And you know, so as we think about these great as we think about these great men of God and how they struggled and how they had difficulties, it shouldn't make us feel like there's no chance for us. It should actually lead us to feel um, very encouraged. Um, one of the best examples that I've heard. I'm a piano player. I'm a keyboard player, and I'm not the greatest player out there. I admit it. I'm not. I enjoy playing, and I've had many people compliment my playing, but I hit wrong keys. I do all kinds of things like that, and I used to feel very self conscious about it. Oh, I didn't play that right. Blah blah blah. And one point in time, I was actually listening to a live. Uh, they recorded a John Tesh concert. They had recorded the live concert that was taking place at Red Rocks, and um, as I sat there and listened, and I'm listening to one of the songs that I actually play, and I've practiced a lot on the song. Still struggled from time to time, and as I sat there and listened, for the many that don't know, if I recall correctly, John Tesh actually plays piano himself, and as I'm listening to them do this particular song, I get to listening, and John Tesh hits some horrible notes. I mean, they're not so horrible that it messes up the song, but he hits some wrong notes. And as a musician, as somebody with an ear for music, I heard them just instantly. I'm like, whoa, that was the wrong notes. And it was at that point that the reality hit me that if a professional who has played for years still hits wrong notes, I should not be beating myself up over hitting a wrong note as I play. And that's what I want to bring out. Yes, we are going to falter. Yes, we are going to struggle in this walk. And it's not the worst thing in the world. You see, in Romans, in the book of Romans, Paul was writing, and he tells them in chapter 5 that because of Adam, sin came into the world, but because of Christ, there's been a payment for that sin, and that the sacrifice has been made. Where this is so important, he makes the comment that where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. He's trying to remind us that when we do falter, and I say when, and I say we, I'm not perfect. I still falter. Oh my goodness. When we falter, God has provided grace to cover. Now, he does continue when he starts in chapter 6. Well, should we just go ahead and sin all we want so that grace will so that we can get more and more grace? And Paul, using his question and answer method, he says, no, God forbid that we would continue to willingly sin just so we can get more grace. And he reminds us that, we died with Christ. We were buried with Christ. We were raised up in newness of life. So every now and then, we are going to let things come between us and seeing God, seeing the Son. And during those points in time, it's really, really simple and basic. Acknowledge that we have let something come between us. You see, God doesn't let something come between us. We choose in some fashion to put something between us and God. But we can just as easily choose to remove whatever is between us and God. We can we can willingly choose to remove the obstacles. And when we do, when that obstacle is out of the way, when we either by ourself or by asking God, I let this get in the way, please take it out of the way. And when we let go of it and it goes out of the way, it's just like after that eclipse today, when the sun came back bright and shining just as it always had, and the fullness of light beamed back down just as if nothing had been in the way. And I'm here to tell you that when we repent, it's just the same as if nothing had been in the way. God doesn't hold it over our heads. God doesn't keep bringing it up. I'm going to tell you that if you've repented of something and it keeps getting brought up, it ain't God doing it. It's not God that keeps bringing up the obstacles, that keeps bringing up the bad things that God already that God has already forgiven us of. So, with that in mind, and it's definitely a much shorter time this evening. I don't want to I don't want to bore you guys with the bad microphone reception and with the potential background noise. Hopefully next week we will be back to normal. I definitely look forward to that. But just quickly, if you have made that falter, if you have stumbled, it's simple. When Peter started sinking, he cried out in purity of heart, just as we were referencing last week about motives. He cried out with pure motive, Lord, save me. And Christ instantly reached down and said it raised him back up, and they walked together on the waves back to the boat. That's how God restores us. It's real simple. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to struggle with it. If you've been faltering as a believer, just say, God, Lord, save me. Lord, forgive me. Say that out of pure motive of heart, and He's faithful and just to forgive. Thank you all for being with me for such a short session this week. Um, but every moment I hope reaches someone who definitely needs to hear it. Don't forget to come by and see us on Facebook, Berean Heart Ministries on Facebook. Can't miss us. Um, if you're really enjoying what we're giving to you on Monday nights, don't forget to hit that subscribe, hit that little bell so that you know when we're online. We're going to start posting a few video lessons in the near future, a few other plans that God's been laying on my heart. I just pray that um, the listeners, would pray that we follow God's direction here so that you can be ministered to in the ways that you need. Don't forget, we love you. You're our family. And looking forward to seeing y'all next week again. Shalom.